Hi, it's Kirby. Today is Sunday, March 16, 2025, and this is part three of my ongoing series on the death of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa. We know that there were some suspicious things that happened, how they were discovered, how it is said that they um, were unalived, let's say, a week apart. Now, for other podcasters who may be listening to me, and I believe you do, Betsy's age is 65. She's not 63. She's not 64. I think that the least we can do is to get her age right. As it turns out, there is additional information that has come out. However, I'm going to be going over a lot more information than anyone else. None of the newspapers, I think, have any of the information that I have been sharing with you, such as who owns the property that Gene Hackman's Santa Fe mansion was on. We can call it a mansion. It's 8,000 acres. I think we can call it a mansion. It had several buildings. I'm going to go over what who was responsible for his estate. I'm going to name names. I'm going to give you additional background information on the person Gene initially selected to carry on if and when the time came when he passed away. And so stay tuned because I'm going to be sharing stuff that has taken me literally a long time to piece together. So before I get started, I do want to thank the people who contribute, to my work. And I have a couple of names here that I want to include, and you're going to have to bear with me today because I have many, many different notes on several different documents. So the first person I want to thank is Vita G, who has been kind enough to make not just a one-time contribution, I believe at some point last month, but who went back to my website and also contributed there. In addition to which, she has subscribed to my newsletter on Substack, and many of you have, by the way, and I thank those of you who have subscribed to my newsletter, where everything is, literally. So thank you guys. I want to thank Gail N. I want to thank Dan R. For also going to my website, making a one-time contribution, which allows me to keep about 90% versus the just shy of 50% that all content creators, not just myself, receive on this platform. However, there is one person who did a super thanks on this platform, but I don't remember which podcast you made that contribution on. And therefore, although I thanked you on the podcast when you made that contribution, and you must know that it's you, I don't recall your username, but I want to thank you because every little bit actually goes into funding my work. All of my research, all of my work is funded by my supporters, and I appreciate everyone's help greatly. That said, I also want to make it a point to respond to a comment that was left earlier this morning. And that comment was, "Oh, I'm surprised that you have so few likes on your podcast." Well, from day one of my work, the people who follow me, whether it was on X, whether it was through my newsletter, purchasing my books, following me here on this platform, are the very people that I out. So I strongly suspect that people who I am outing, who are part of this multi-generational, very dark, uh, tangled web, they're not going to like that I have outed them. So for those of us who are here for the true purpose of putting this web into clearer focus for all of us to see, it's your opportunity to by liking this podcast, by subscribing so that you get a heads up when I upload new information, that you're basically telling the other people who are here and not liking and perhaps leaving a snark comment, right? Your like is a way to tell them, hey, you know what? Bugger off. I could use a stronger word, but it is Sunday morning, so I will just leave it at bugger off. And so here's what's going on. And then after I share with you the new information, I'm going to go back into history and I'm going to share with you additional information and names. So a physician in New Mexico revealed, and this came out in the Daily Mail. I'm surprised that TMZ did not get this. However, I know that the Daily Mail, the Sun, they pay people for stories. Now they can pay as little as $50, which is something they tried to get away with me during the time that I was doing most of the reporting on the Jeff case, and I would discover things. And so when I didn't want to accept $50 because my finds were so amazing, they would just steal my information, these papers in the UK, and run with it. That said, the New York Post also stole my work, however, and I didn't get paid. But I'm sure that this physician from New Mexico claimed that Betsy, who is said to have died on February 11th of hantavirus, which is a very rare rat-borne respiratory disease, that, she dropped dead in her house on February 11th. And I just want to remind you that she was found without any clothes on. So she had gone into the bathroom, and no other channel has reported this. And I don't know why, but she was found not wearing anything. She didn't even have any shoes on. So she was walking around her house going into the bathroom barefoot. And according to this doctor, she called him that morning, on the morning after the day that she supposedly died. So she supposedly died on the February 11th, but she called his office on February 12th. Now, it wasn't the first time that she had called his office. She had called his office, and by the way, the doctor's name is Joshua, but it's spelled, maybe it's just spelled, it's I pronounce it wrong. I'm gonna just spell that Josiah, child. And he's a former emergency care specialist who now runs a sort of like a health facility called Cloudberry in Santa Fe. And he told the Daily Mail that, well, gee, Mrs. Hackman didn't die on February 11th because she called my clinic on February 12th. And then he added, she called me a couple of weeks before her death to ask about getting an EKG, meaning an echocardiogram, which is a heart scan for people who have heart issues, for her husband. She was not a patient of mine, but one of my patients recommended my clinic to her, meaning Cloudberry, and she made an appointment for herself for February 12th. It was for something unrelated to anything respiratory. So hantavirus is something that affects your lungs. And initially, when I reported in part 2 of what is now going to be an ongoing series on the death of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, there are a couple of things. Number one, Gene Hackman, although it is said that he had Alzheimer's, there's a photograph of him that was taken 1 year ago, almost 1 year ago to this day. And he was driving his car. Like, he's stepping out of the car. Somebody snapped a picture of him, but he was in the driver's seat. His neighbors, by the way, all said that he exercised regularly, that he was in really good shape. Remember, he's 95. Betsy was into very healthy living. She only gave Jean healthy food. There's a lot that I'm going to share about the food and what's going on and stuff like that. However, she called him. She had an appointment for February 12th. And again, it was not related to anything respiratory. And then he said that 2 days before, so that on the 10th, she canceled her appointment. Well, okay, no, I have to start that over again. So the way that it happened was she made an appointment for her husband. However, she had made an appointment for herself. She called the morning of February 12th. So she was still speaking normally. She had called the office for two things. I just want to reiterate and make this very clear. So she called to make an appointment for their office to give Jean an EKG. And then she also called to make an appointment to come in for herself. The reason that she made an appointment was not specified. However, it was not related to anything having to do with her respiratory issues. The morning of her appointment, she called them again. So she was clearly intending, it appears, to go to the appointment, and she may have possibly passed away, not on the 11th, as per all of the reports. And I think I mentioned that I do not trust any of the autopsy findings released by any office. I just don't trust them when it pertains to a prominent person like this, because they can be monkeyed around with. I mean, it's not the first time. So, for example, when Troy Bonner passed away, Troy Bonner, you may recall, is one of the Franklin survivors who didn't survive very long because he ran into a hospital where he was then, let's just say, unalived. But and then I have seen his death certificate. It says that he died of, quote, natural causes. This is a young guy. Ran into a hospital because he was afraid. He was carrying the book that DeCamp had written, saying that because of this book, he was going to be killed. And indeed, he was. He was, initially the reports were that, oh, he died of an OD. Okay, he's in a hospital setting. But the actual death certificate for Troy Bonner says natural causes. So I do not believe a lot of these reports. Okay, so that the reports that we have gotten from, let's say, the toxicology report, who said, oh, she had hantavirus. Well, you know what? I'm beginning to think she didn't have hantavirus. All right. So the other thing was that his pacemaker showed that he had passed away on February 18. Now, they did say that there was no food in his stomach. Well, okay. There was also another report indicating there was no food in the refrigerator. So I think some of you may have heard that they don't want to release, that the family does not want to release photographs, not just of the deceased bodies as they were found, which I can understand, but also of the house, because it was apparently not well maintained, that it was, quote, very dusty. Well, the front door had been open for at least a week, and they live in the desert. I live in New York, and my apartment gets dusty very, very regularly. And I don't live in the desert, but I'm always dusting. And so the other thing, they found that there was no food in the refrigerator. So whatever food was in the refrigerator, because I doubt when Betsy passed away, let's say she did pass away. For argument's sake, let's say she passed away 1 week earlier, for argument's sake. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. she would have had food in the refrigerator. Jean wasn't so incapacitated unless within the last 3 months or so, because neighbors who saw him 3 months ago said that he seemed, to be on the ball. So apparently he could have just easily gone into the fridge and pulled out, a yogurt or something and eaten it. However, there was, at the time that they looked into the fridge, there was no food there. So he may have eaten whatever was there. And if indeed she was not around to take care of him, then didn't have anything to eat for days, possibly a week. And then he was found again in the mudroom. Now, they were found 20 feet apart. My living room is almost 20 feet in length. And it's not that far away when you think about it. I'm sitting in my living room right now. It's almost, I have a large living room compared to other apartments in Manhattan. And so, it's like from one side of the room to the other, I'm looking, and it's not a lot, it's just a couple of steps away, and that's 20 feet. Think about it, 20 feet. It's not that far away from each other. But he was found again in the mudroom on the floor. Again, his sunglasses had fallen off. He was walking around the house with his cane. Now, there are some people, and he would be one of these, that would alternate between using a cane and using a walker. The fact that he was using his cane, because I think I told you that I took care of a family member who was partially paralyzed after suffering a stroke. When he began to get physical therapy, which by the way, I paid for. And I know some of you were stunned. Oh, you took care of a family member. Wow. Yeah, well, it's a natural thing that one does if you have a heart. So I don't know why there was such shock that I would take care of a family member who I had to, clean up after in every way possible. However, when he was learning how to almost like drag his paralyzed leg, he would sometimes use the walker, and then sometimes just to start retraining his muscles, hoping to get some traction on it, he would, and that's how he was taught, by the therapy professionals. And I would imagine that Gene Hackman had similar training by the physicians who took care of him, that he would alternate between a walker and a cane. The fact that he had the cane and was near, I believe, one of the exits of the house, because the house had multiple exits, could mean that he was on his way outside. Now, the so-called groundskeepers, who are said by, let's say, other podcasters to have, quote, known the Hackmans and, quote, worked for them for 16 years, that's not necessarily the case. Gene and Betsy Hackman lived in a gated community, and these landscape workers, let's call them, for argument's sake, because they maintained the grounds for the entire gated community, not just for Betsy and Gene. So they were there doing work, not just for Betsy and Gene, but they're the ones who found, oh, there's something wrong going on here. And if you recall, the initial report said that they saw the door was ajar. That's who called. One of those guys is the person who contacted the authorities. And during that phone call, he could see her legs from the front door of the house, which again was ajar. Okay. Now, again, one of the three dogs was in a crate. So it seems to me that on the morning of February the 12th, Betsy was getting ready to not just go to her appointment, her medical appointment at this doctor's office, but who possibly was going to take her smallest dog, they had 3 dogs, to a vet or to get groomed and drop him off on her way. That's how it seems to me, because I once had a pet, and if I was going to run an errand or do something, I would just put my pet into the carrier as I was getting ready, because after I got ready to grab the pet and put the pet in a carrier would have, the shedding of the hair would have been too much. So I would normally, before I took a shower and get ready for whatever I was going to do to leave my pet to get groomed, I would do that again before I took a shower. So it seems that Betsy put her dog in a crate before she was about to take a shower, and then something mysterious and unknown happened. And then Jean, we have to go back to what Randy Quaid said. He believes that there are a group of Hollywood insiders, and as I progress with sharing with you additional details of this, it seems more and more likely that that's exactly what's going on here, that there's a group of Hollywood insiders who have, in fact, been, let's call it, responsible for the unaliving. And by the way, if anyone here has a problem, and it's not even like the regular people, it is the people on the other side who make comments about, oh, the use of the word unaliving. Go ahead, make my day. Leave a comment saying that there is no such word as unaliving, and I will block you from my platform so that you don't have to be bothered with listening to the way that, as a content creator, which is what I am right now, and a journalist, an investigative journalist, sharing my very hard work, that I'm going to have a troll leave a comment. And I'm sorry to share this with you guys, but it's important because I know some of you read comments, and I want you to understand that the comments section is open to the other side as well. And that there have been, if they can't find something wrong with what you're saying because it doesn't, well, they're going to leave silly things that are useless. And these people they get paid to do that. And so just be my guest. You want to say there's no such word as unalive? Well, I'm going to just block your account. Just be happy, and you won't ever have to read or see my work again. Then this an LA-based doctor added that medical professionals are all wondering where this hantavirus thing came from, because typically if you have a hantavirus, according to this doctor, Dr. Child, he's like, you know what? I'm not a hantavirus expert, but most patients who have that diagnosis, they die in a hospital. That's true, because you become increasingly out of breath and you end up in the hospital. And he goes on, it is surprising that Mrs. Hackman spoke to my office on the phone on February the 10th and again on February the 12th, and did not appear as if she was in respiratory distress. So he's like, respiratory failure is not sudden. It is something that worsens over a couple of days. So guess what? I am going to say it right here. She did not die of hantavirus. Sorry, that is untrue. Categorically untrue. And he goes on to explain, most people get admitted to the emergency room because they're having trouble breathing. It's exceedingly rare for a seemingly healthy 65-year-old to drop dead of it. In fact, no one has ever heard of such a thing. Okay, so certainly we are to believe that this woman, this healthy 65-year-old who exercises regularly, who makes sure to make appointments for herself and her husband, who really has just been an exceptional wife, Betsy Arakawa, exceptional wife to Gene Hackman. We're supposed to believe that she is the only person on the planet to have died on the spot of this. It's never happened. She's a medical miracle, and it also happened after she was pronounced dead. So it happened at, when she's a ghost. And you know what? I mean, a lot of this stuff I just get very emotional about because there's so many unseen forces that are always conspiring behind the scenes. And does the public has a vested interest in somebody like Gene Hackman. You know, we have been the ones to pay to watch his movies, to support his work. The revenue stream comes from the public. That is who Hollywood depends on, the public. And so if you're going to go around whacking somebody like Hackman and his wife and others, and I have spoken about Clive Davis and how I'm not the only one to believe that he had a cause in the unalivement of Janis Joplin, of Whitney Houston, and the names go on and on. And of course, now we have Sean Diddy Puffy Combs being accused of the very same thing. And so, yeah, do I think that something unusual happened? Yeah. Now, there's a trust. Now, here's the thing. They did not leave. They had a will, and in their will, they left everything to each other. Okay, so they left everything. So Hackman had a will that he made in 1995, and he made Betsy, his wife, his sole beneficiary. His three children, Christopher and the two daughters, Leslie and Elizabeth, none of them are in his will. And then Arakawa left her assets, most of her assets, to her husband, Hackman. However, the document also includes a clause stating that if they died within 90 days of each other, it would be considered a simultaneous death. So this death, as per their own estate planning, because when you have financial assets, and by the way, they didn't own the home, because I'm going to get to who owns the home and more information on that, so stay tuned. So this is considered a simultaneous death, and all of her assets would be donated to charity. Now, the charity that they selected, I don't know, but I have a suspicion that it might be something that I will be naming as soon as I go back and share additional information on his initial, let's call it Hollywood agent. So we know that Betsy, just to review, was the second wife, that he had 3 kids with his first wife, Faye Maltese. Now, while he was not at home, because he was a very busy, in-demand actor, he really didn't have such a close relationship with his children, and he and Betsy did not have children. Now, Christopher is 65, Leslie Ann is 58, Elizabeth Jean is 62. So these are middle-age, let's call them offspring versus children, because they're not children anymore. Christopher Allen is now going to dispute his father's will. Well, good luck to you, Christopher. You didn't even bother to call and check in on your father. Shame on you and your 2 sisters. Good luck to you, pal. Now, the reason that I think that they're going to have a hard time is because, well, first of all, his relationship with his previous wife was on good terms. They spoke on the phone often. Good on you, Faye. Good on you. You should have pushed your kids to do the same thing. Faye said that she had spoken to him during his final weeks. And then Now instead of like, they had an actual trust. They created a trust. And this trust is exactly the kind of thing that Gene's previous um his his rep, that handled his contracts and everything, is what he had. So, and that is what you do. It's like it's kind of like an estate planning tool. So this is a trust, and I'm going to tell you who he made it out to and who it is. But before I do that, I just want to explain what a trust is. So a trust is kind of like if you have assets, meaning that you have wealth, and in their case, their wealth is estimated to be 80 million. And you want to ensure that your, I'm going to say wealth again, is preserved and transferred according to your wishes. You make a private trust, which provides protection against creditors, lawsuits, and claims, and it shields a person's assets, in this case, a couple's assets, their assets, and maintaining integrity for either future generations and or whomever Gene and his wife decide it would be their beneficiaries. Now, when you create a trust, you have to fund the trust. And then funding the trust involves transferring the assets from your personal ownership to the ownership of the trust. And so what the person, like, so my ex-husband, for example, was uh, but when you set up a trust, then the person that manages the trust is called the trustee and the executor, kind of. And in in all of these cases, so they get to pay themselves. So my ex-husband was the let's say the trustee for his mother's estate. Now his mother's estate was not worth nearly as much. And again, I do a lot of things. I created an income stream for my husband's mother's property. She had property that she had not done anything with, and I created a revenue stream. And I'm not going to go into detail about what I did, but what that enabled him to do was that the minute I created a revenue stream for him, it allowed him to then, just as the trustee, well, first of all, he was paying himself a very generous annual salary that he selected, so that the person who is in charge of your trust gets paid. That's just considered normal. I considered it strange because it was the first time I had come in contact with somebody who was, who had a trust, and he was my husband. And I was like, okay, so because I was helping my husband, I created a revenue stream. I was then a little surprised when he turned around and he obtained a $1.65 million loan from the bank based on what the property was worth after I did what I did to it. I wasn't given it, like I wasn't given a dime from the 1.65 million that he turned around. So I'm saying that anybody who was handling the Hackman Trust for Betsy and Jean, they get financial income from this, and they can turn around anybody who owns is in charge of your trust and actually borrow against it. And I don't see that anywhere, not even in the legal websites that I went to sort of like double check my information before I did this podcast. Now, initially when he did his trust, he left it to he appointed an attorney that was his friend by the name of Michael Sutin, that's Sutin, as his uh, personal representative for the estate. Okay. And by the way, all of you, all of the mainstream media, it's not called state, it's called estate, Estate. Like, please, I know that it's hard to read now and spell, but please, if you're going to write something in a mainstream media source, make sure that you know the difference between the word state and estate. Because while I can understand indie media people maybe not understanding a certain term, I expect a little bit more from people who are employed and have all kinds of great benefits as a result of working for one of these newspapers. In any event, he made Michael Sutin the person to be his, his go-to person to that's who created his, the estate for him, the trust. And however, this guy, Sutin, he died in 2019. And he was an attorney in Santa Fe. However, he died in Texas because 2 years before that, he moved in with his daughter because he was getting older and he too had Alzheimer's. There must be something in the air in New Mexico with Alzheimer's, but he moved from New Mexico to his daughter's house in Texas, where he died in 2019. So he only lived another 2 years under the care of his daughter. Now, when he died, Gene then appointed Julia Peters as his second successor. Now, Peters is the chief counsel, meaning she's the chief attorney at Avalon Trust Company. It is a Santa Fe investment firm, meaning that they use these trusts and they actually invest, I suppose, on behalf of their clients. Now, what I want to say is that I explained to you that Edgar Gross is the person who owns the property that Gene's estate is on. I told you that it wasn't in their name, that it was in the name of Edgar Gross. Now, Edgar Gross, I'm just going to try to give you a quick summary. He represented clients. He was in the industry for 5 decades. He represented clients, writers, directors, music industry people, names like William Friedkin, Paul Schrader, Linda Evans, Angelica Houston, Richard Gere, Joe Cocker, the Commodores, Bill Withers. It's a long list. He was a high-end talent manager. Now, when he died, I think I mentioned to you that he requested that in lieu of flowers, and by the way, in the Jewish tradition, nobody believes in the flower thing because like the man I was going to marry was Jewish and he died. In fact, he died a year and 2 days ago to the let's say he died on March 14th, and I'm not going to say what year he died. It was more than a year ago. But so when I go to visit his grave, because he's Jewish, I leave a stone. Like everybody leaves a stone because flowers die. Now, people who are Christian, so if I go to visit my family, then, you take flowers. But so when somebody dies and they're in the Jewish faith, they're going to say, in lieu of flowers, because not everybody knows this, they're like, okay, send a donation to the Exceptional Children's Foundation. Now, they were very big donors. He and his wife, and I'm going to be sharing a little more information about this guy, Gross. They were significant donors to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. Now, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center is the same medical center that all of the Jeff-related people are connected to. Cedars-Sinai is not just in Los Angeles. Cedars-Sinai is in New York. I have written about Cedars-Sinai in many of my articles on my Substack. Cedars-Sinai is also where Jeff's alleged girlfriend of 8 to 9 years, Eva Anderson, who then married Dubin. And by the way, Dubin did not come along as a billionaire. He was made a billionaire, as I explain on my Substack. So I see a lot of people pronouncing themselves Epstein experts, but they don't know that, let's say, so for example, Glenn Dubin drove a taxi. His father worked for my abuser's father. He was not rich. He was made rich through the use of the BLACKMAIL, enabled by his friend Jeff. That is how he was made rich. It's the only explanation I have for how, and I know I'm digressing here, but look, I'm giving you information that no one else is going to give you. So, if I digress, it's for a reason. So she was connected. Eva was connected to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The other thing about Eva is that we heard from Virginia that her medical license was in fact purchased by Jeff. And in fact, I have found several other, let's call it in quotes, I'm going to use air quotes, physicians that he purchased a license for. And again, on my Substack, I have information that shows who he purchased these from. I don't see that information anywhere else. So the fact that they too, like my abuser gave Cedars-Sinai 25 million at some point, and then I'm trying to remember another one of these guys, again connected to Leon Black, connected to all of this stuff. His name escapes me, but he gave 40 million at some point. He's got a whole wing dedicated to himself. Now, I am very suspicious because we're talking about also the things that I delve into are brain studies. And when I say brain studies, I do mean MK, which never stops. I have information showing that, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that connects Jeff to MK with all of the scientists and all of the medical stuff and this ongoing program, let's say. It's just never stops. So I suspect that something is interesting, let's say, about the fact that this husband and wife funded Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, and that in fact that they supported Exceptional Children's Foundation. In every one of these people's lives, there is a connection to a child's foundation. Now, I did a little digging into the Exceptional Children's Foundation. You may want to do the same. There was a lawsuit against them, but I just wanted to just bring you additional information, so I'm not going to go into that. However, before Edgar became this high-powered, so let me just start that sentence again. Before Edgar Gross became this high-powered Hollywood wheeler dealer kind of guy, he worked for a very interesting person. Again, you're not going to find this anywhere. It takes time for me to peel off the layers of this onion. And so he died for, and nobody even like knew his name. People were just like, oh, it's this guy, I.H. Prince Metal. I.H. Prince Metal. So, people who use initials as opposed to their full name, or like in the case of J. Stanley Pottinger, for example, he dropped his first name. He uses Stanley. We know he's a spy. Okay, well, this guy, his real name is Isidore Pritzmetal, who, by the way, died pretty young. He died at the age of 64, but he was someone that was born in the 1800s. The late 1800s. And that is who, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him. And that is who Edgar Gross initially worked for. Now, I found that he had represented MGM, like meaning MGM Studios, the motion picture thing. He also represented Otto Preminger, Gary Cooper, and he represented novelists. Well, I didn't like even know that a Hollywood producer would represent a novelist until I remembered that my own abuser's father funneled money into Sidney Sheldon, let's say, who is a novelist. He was, and they made a movie, The Other Side of Midnight, and they made Hair and Shampoo, which Warren Beatty was in. And so, yeah, they fund novelists because then they option their work for Hollywood. I mean, it's a big web. It's a big spider's web. And the novelist that he represented is Erich Maria Remarque, a German-born novelist, and he was past president, by the way, of the Beverly Hills Bar Association. Very, very top layer position. He was also a founding member of the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions in Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara. And so he's like in a lot of different places. He's in Santa Barbara, he's in Los Angeles, because California is an enormous state with like so many different counties. So it's not, and they're all like different cities. It's so and then like he was appointed by former Governor Edmund Brown, another guy who goes way back into history, to serve on the Citizens Committee on U.S.-Mexican Relations. That's back when even part of California was still annexed to Mexico before it became part of California. I mean, this goes back historically. And then he also served on the board of directors of the Jewish Federation Council, as national vice president of the American Jewish Council, and as president of the Los Angeles Hillel Council, and as vice president of the board of directors, again, of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Now, as far as when we go back, let's say, to Hackman's initial rep, Edgar, his wife, by the way, who her name is Marcelina. She is now 89 years old. She was born on March 29, 1935, and she lives in the very ritzy 90210 address. She lives smack in Beverly Hills. Now, we know that the person who gave the information initially to the media was Edgar Gross's son, Matthew. Matthew is 60 years old. He also has a home in California, in Calabasas, in addition to the home he has in Santa Fe, New Mexico. His mother, as I said, is 89 years old. When her husband passed away, she apparently fought the estate. It was settled. The documents have been pulled. I could not get into them. I didn't want to do, any more work than I've already done on this regarding them. However, Matthew has become the spokesperson, and the person who is still handling the estate of his father, Edgar Gross, which owns the property where Hackman died. Well, let's see how that plays out, because now we have two estates. We have the estate created by Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy, and I told you who's running that. It's not his kids, and by the way, his kids are going to try, at least his son, meaning Gene Hackman's son, is going to try to dispute the will. No, you can't do that, because the way you can dispute a will is if your father did indeed have Alzheimer's and he made a will, let's say, a short time before he died, you can dispute it on the grounds that he was incapacitated, meaning he was mentally unfit and didn't know what he was doing. But the fact that Gene Hackman created this trust in 1995, so a long time ago, decades ago, when he was sound of body and mind, it means he knew what he was doing. So he didn't leave anything to his kids. Let's see if there are provisions for them in the estate. But if the guy already wants to fight this, it is almost a certainty that there is no provision in the estate that Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa created again in 1995. All right, guys. Well, this has been a long one. I hope that I have answered a lot of your questions, and I am very curious to hear your thoughts. Give this a like. Have a good day. Bye.